Okay, so here we start a new module in this course, which is called Foundations of the Web. In this module, we are going to see some of the fundamental concepts of the web. So first thing you will see that what is internet? Internet is a large network of computers which can communicate among each other, right? There are a lot of computers and then each of them can communicate with one another. That is internet. So basically what it does is that from one computer to another on the internet you can send and receive data, right? So that's why you can think of it as a digital highway. So it is a highway for your digital data, right? In fact, in the early days of the internet, when the internet term was not coined itself, then this thing was called sort of digital highway only. Now, let's look at a brief history of the internet. So, how it got evolved. So, almost in late 1950s and early 1960s, there was a project called ARPANET, right? Which was Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense funded project, where what happens is that they were trying to interconnect their different bases so that they can communicate. In 1980s, this network ARPANET, many public and private universities of the US joined that network, and in 1991, Tim Berners-Lee, he's a British scientist, he proposed something called Wide Web. We'll look at it in detail in this course, that what it is. But it is a network of hypertext documents with hyperlinks for navigating among them. So what this does not make much sense, right? So you can see that what it means is that a hypertext you can right now think as the connected document. So just replace the word hyper with connected, which means that let's say there are many documents, and if they are interlinked, then those sort of documents are called hypertext. Similarly, if when we are talking about hyperlinks, then we'll say that different documents from one document to another document, the navigation is through a link, and that thing is called a hyperlink. Anyways, this Tim Berners-Lee, he was the person who proposed this whole thing in the beginning, and which became the foundation for the whole of the World Wide Web, which is basically built on top of the internet. So there's a difference between World Wide Web and internet, which will go in detail in the later part of the videos. But for now, this should be enough. So what is internet? Internet will be this is a simplified diagram of internet, where you can consider internet as a simple wire, right? And then different computers which want to join the internet, they will just connect to this wire. This is a simplified diagram, right? So if let's say these 6 computers are connected to the internet, then any one of them can communicate to any other computer on the network, right? So this can communicate to this can communicate to this can communicate to this. So you can understand, right? So this is a simplified diagram, and it helps if you visualize it with simplicity. Later we'll see that how complex it can be, but for now I think it should work. Okay, so next we are going to see some of the terminologies, where we'll see that what is a URL, what is hyperlink, what is the difference between web page and a website, what's the client server, where does router go into the mix. Apart from that, what is a domain name, what is port, what is something called origin, and what is host name. So all these things will look but we'll look at it one at a time. Let's start with URLs, right? So URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. What is that? It is an addressing system to keep track of documents. It can be simple HTML documents, it can be various files, images, okay, anything on the web which is hosted on the web. We have to find an addressing system to locate that resource or asset or document, right? So that is the purpose of URL. So for example, let's say you go to Wikipedia, then when you land this page, then you see here, right, this whole thing is called a URL, right? So for this page, this URL provides a unique address, right? A unique way of navigating and coming to this place. So that is what the purpose of URL is. Now, this is done mainly using the HTTP protocol. So you can see that this page also uses HTTP. So we'll come later that what is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. But for now, you can simply understand that HTTPS is also HTTP, just a secured version of it, right? Some additional security is there. Other than that, it is simply HTTP. Okay. Next, we can understand. We would also like to understand that this URL is not specific to just HTTP, right? These URLs can be used for file transfer, for emails. So, like HTTP is a protocol. Protocol is what? A protocol is a set of rules for communicating between different computers on the web. As simple as that. Now, so that is a sort of a language to speak. Now, that thing for web, it might be this, for file transfer, it might be something else, for email transfer, it might be something else, and each of them have a separate set of protocols. For example, HTTP and HTTPS, these are used here, right, in directly in the web. Now, file transfer, something called FTP is there, which is file transfer protocol. Actually, there is a secure version of this also called SFTP, which is actually nowadays used. Similarly, for emails, there is something called SMTP, IMAP, POP3. So the point is that there are many protocols. You don't need to learn all of those. We are just trying to give you an overview so that you can understand. This SMTP means Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So these things are there, and many I'm just trying to highlight here that when somebody says URL, that is fine. Almost every time it will be used in the sense of the web, but the concept is general and you should understand that. That is the entire point of this exercise. Next, let me give you some examples of URLs, right? So I will give simple web examples, HTTP URL examples. So these, I told you, right? For example, like this is a URL. Similarly, all these three are URLs, right? Now you will see that, okay, this is example.com, this is app.example.com, this is about.google. What is that? So first thing you have to understand is that, see, these two are starting with HTTP and this thing is starting with HTTPS. So you have to understand the first thing which I already mentioned, that HTTPS is simply a secure version of your HTTP protocol, right? We'll go in detail that what is HTTP protocol, how it works, what is the purpose, what are the intricacies of it. But for now, you just understand that HTTP protocol is something which is used in the web and it is a secure version of it. So that is one aspect, right? HTTP versus HTTPS, that you understood, right? Now, there is something called domain name. What is domain name? So you see, after this colon double slash, whatever comes before the next slash, that is called domain name. So there is a concept of port also, but we will exclude that for now. The point is that let's say if there is no port, then this thing, whole thing is called example.com. That is domain name. Here app.example.com. This is domain name. Here about.google. This is domain name. So this example I just wanted to highlight because it does not mean that all domain names end with .com or .net or .org. What here you can see that .org is there, but you can see that there are domains like .google. See, about.google. There's no .com here, right? So you can see that the whole URL is about.google. .google. Google owns its own separate TLD. It is called TLD, but the point is that we can understand that anything can be a TLD. the point is that this part is called domain name, which we will be using this term domain name extensively later. Just for understanding, I wanted to highlight that what is a domain name in a URL. Okay, next we will see what is a web page. A web page is a document displayed by a browser. So a document displayed by a browser, what does it mean? So when you see this web page, or okay, we can, this is also a web page, right? So we can open this. There is something called view source. If you see this, then you'll see that there is something called HTML. You see this whole thing, you don't need to understand anything, but just see that there is something, some structuring is there, and this whole thing which you are seeing is just this thing only. This thing rendered by browser, it looks like this, nothing else, right? So the web pages are documents which are displayed by the browser, and such documents are written in HTML, as I showed you. Now, a web page can embed different types of resources, right? Such as styles, scripts, media, understand? Images, videos, audio, CSS. So CSS is used for styles. JavaScript is used for interactivity and some sort of scripting on the web, on the front end side of the web. So the point is that these things can be embedded. HTML is the basic thing. HTML is the basic structure, how the structure of the page is created, and on top the semantics of the page is created. On top of that, how these things look, feel, what are the look and feel, what is the look and feel of these things, that is driven by CSS. So how it will interact when I click on this, okay, got it, then what will happen when I click on some other button, what will happen, right? So when I scroll, then how the behavior should be. So these things might be driven by JavaScript interactivity, right? So you can understand that these things are, when they are saying that it is embedded, see, so you don't need to understand a lot of things, but you see that, see, this is like sort of a CSS file embedded inside HTML, right? See, this is a different type of something, right, which is embedded inside HTML, which means that you can see that different types of things can be embedded inside. You don't need to understand any of those right now, but the point is that images, videos, music, styling, JavaScript, all these things. So you will see, definitely see some JavaScript files also, right? So you see, these are some JavaScript files which are embedded inside this HTML document. So this is a web page, simple. Now what is a website? There's a simple difference between a website and a web page. A web page is a single page, right, and collection of those pages which are linked. And more importantly, linking can be done to external sites also, right, that share a unique domain name. So for example, if you see here, then you see that, okay, if I go to products, then I will see about.google/products. If I go to stories, then it is about.google/stories. So these pages are there, but they are linked with the same domain name, and that's why all these pages combinedly create the website. That website is called about.google, let's say, right? So this whole thing is a website. But if I click on this thing, you see, you will go to a different place. See, blog.google, right? It is a different place altogether. It is not part of this about.google, right? So this thing is a separate website, and all the pages which are part of this domain, that is so set of web pages shared with a common domain name. Simple definition. That is the definition of a website. Now, what is homepage? So homepage is, as we mentioned, that when you type just the domain name without any path, this part is called the path, right? Anything which comes later after the domain name finishes, anything which comes later, or here can be any other thing, right? So the whole thing after this part is called path. Now, if you don't have any path, simple this thing, right, then whatever opens the default page, right, let's say you go to simply google.com, right, whatever opens default, so that thing is called the index page or home page. Now we'll see what is a hyperlink. So Hyperlink is something like this, right? You see, these things are hyperlink. As I mentioned earlier, that HTML, the full form is basically hypertext markup language. HTML is trying to connect different set of documents with one another, right? And that's why it is called hypertext. As I said, that try to replace hyper with connected, right? So hypertext means connected text, right? So in that lens, if you see, then hyperlink is basically trying to link one page to another page, right? Now what is the problem? The problem with linking is that you don't know what is the how much is the complication in the length and uh, different characters, and you have to remember. So it is very cumbersome to handle all the nuances of a complete URL, right? So hyperlink simplifies that, right? It can be very hard to type complete URLs every time, right? If somebody tells you that you can't click any link, you have to every time write the whole thing here, entire URL here. That is very cumbersome, right? If somebody shared you some link, you can open it directly, like, right? But you can paste it and enter, right? But if every time you have to navigate from one place to another, and then you have to type everything, that is going to be very difficult, right? So for that, there is a concept of link, which is going to connect one document to the another. See, these things are very simple, but you have to understand the fundamentals, because other things will be built on these simple concepts, right? So they correlate, hyperlinks correlate some text with a string. So this, let's say this string is there. I will say that this string, when somebody clicks, then it means that it should go to some other URL, and that URL is how that URL is connected to that text. That and all we will see later, right, in HTML. But for now, you understand something like that what is the concept of a link in a HTML document. So a user can go to the target document by clicking it, right? But the general term is activating it, because you might not be always in a desktop, right? You might be in a phone or something. So activating it, and it can be activated by a in a number of ways, right? It can be activated by mouse clicks. It can be activated by keyboard shortcuts. It can be activated by screen touch and all that, right? But anyways, once it is activated, you can go to the next page in the browser. So I already mentioned about hypertext, that a set of documents that are interconnected using hyperlinks, that is called hypertext. Why that is important? Because if somebody says you that what is HTML, HTML is hypertext markup language. What is hypertext? You should understand that hypertext is simply interconnected set of documents. That's it, using hyperlinks.